Right.
Hey, Dave, I had a quote from you, and I kind of want Dean also to comment on this. We've talked a lot about treadmill running, outside running, and the nuances of both. Dave, this is your quote. It says, "The treadmill is a mean, ugly-minded bending machine."
Hmm.
That's not very complimentary what Zach is doing right now. And obviously, you're the current 100-mile world record holder, but it's a mean, ugly machine. Uh,
It
why?
is. Absolutely, it is. It's it could be your worst enemy, or it could be it could be the greatest tool to become the best athlete that you can be. So it's a tool, right? And so I think it all depends on how you wrap your head around what you're doing and how you're doing it, right? So, in 2016, I broke the world record. You've got it behind me. Ran 260 kilometers, 260 point something on a treadmill,
Yeah.
24 hours. And then, I ended up a couple of years after that, got the 100-mile. But that 24-hour treadmill world record, I mean, I did in front of thousands of people at the Calgary Marathon Race Expo. And, it could be 1 hour, it could be the most exhilarating experience of your life. You could end up taking that and creating so much growth and such a meaningful experience with that, with having to circumnavigate your mental images and the voices in your head, positive and negative. And then the next minute, it's a cage, it's a trap. I remember, in the 24-hour world record, I remember, about 18 hours in, it was just stacked with people. Like, there were layers and layers and layers and layers of people that were watching. And at that point, I wanted to be left alone. I was in a space, and I never use the word pain and suffering when I'm running. It's uncomfortable. But I was in a space where I would rather sit down and have a burger and a beer. And I knew that was coming. And I remember I was running, and I was also staring at this across the entire, it's a large building in Calgary. And there was a sign, an exit sign, that was a little bit crooked, and it just wanted so desperately to pause my treadmill, even though I would ruin 4 or 5 minutes, and go over there and fix it, right? Because it was bothering me that much. And there were people as well too that were coming by. And I when you're running on a treadmill, and you don't want to be looking and twisting your body too much. You look at Zach, and he's locked in to a certain degree, and that's what his body is giving him, and he's going to take it. And so when you're running and you're looking ahead, you forget that you have a little space of concrete in front of you that you become very intimate with. And after a while, what happens is people end up coming and standing right in the middle of your bloody square. And you're like, hey, that's my square. You don't know how that, how that much bothers me, but they would stand there, and you think, okay, I'm gonna stare right through them, right? And you're staring right through them, and then they start waving because they're thinking that you're connecting with them, and you're thinking, like, just give me some space, man. And I remember during the last maybe about 6 hours, 5-6 hours of that treadmill, the 24-hour treadmill, you blurred your eyes. You went, cross-eyed a little bit, just so you don't see people, but you see a space between the spaces. And at that moment, I think, I truly believe that the mind only knows two things: the pictures you draw for it and the words that you tell it. And at that point, when you're in that level of discomfort, it's really easy to convince yourself of crap, that, there's no way you can do this, and choosing comfort. Or you find a special space, and you go and crush it, and you finish what you start. And I think that's exactly what Zach's doing right now. So that's what I love about Treadmill, and I can't wait to talk to him next week, because either he's either suffering and blowing up, terribly, or he's going to have the most rewarding experience of his athletic career today.
Well, he looks good right now, Dave. That was a beautiful synopsis. And Dean, I'm going to come back to you. We got an update that's on the screen. 41 miles, 4 hours and 54 minutes. So he's rocking. He's right on target. So comments, Dean, when you're looking at this graph?
Yeah, no, I mean, I could relate to every word you said, Dave, because I could absolutely, you were saying this, and I'm like, I just pictured in my mind the same exact experience. And, when I tried to break the 24-hour record, I was at 85 miles at the halfway point. And like you said, I mean, I felt great at halfway, and Zach looks pretty strong right now, but you really never know what's going through his head and what's going to happen later on. So, although he is on pace, it's still very early on in a very long day.
One of the things, Dave, just for the viewer, your 24-hour record, and Dean, you said you were at 85 miles. Well, you doubled that. Dave, your total distance in 260 kilometers is around 155 miles, I think. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's 160 miles.
160. Yeah. I hate to shortchange you for that.
No, it's all good.
All that work, that's bad math on my side. But Dean, you were on a pace that would have exceeded that. But that obviously that back end, and even looking at Zach's data right now, we're not even at the halfway point right now for his goal today. And I don't know if you remember, but I'm a numbers guy, Dean, as you mentioned. His heart rate a while ago was at 148, 149. So as Dan Puzey was talking about, when you're in that confined area, you don't have the cooling, even though he's got the fans on. His heart rate's gone up 3 or 4 beats, but look at his pace though. His pace is a little bit faster, 652 per mile. So, we would see a slight rise in the heart rate. I don't think it's anything to worry about, but his pace is extraordinary.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm sure that, Zach in the back of his mind right now, he's thinking, I've only got, 7 hours left to go. I might want to just, go ahead and drop the hammer. Looking at his 1900 miles, he's got the engine that he can drive the pace right now and put it out of question in the next 20, 30 miles. And so I'm sure that Zach has got his monkey brain going. I know right around this time when I did my 100-mile treadmill, I had a TV in front of me, and I don't know if Zach does right now down the hallway. It looks like he's looking through a door. And so I know right around the 30, 40, 50 mile mark, you guys ever seen those satisfying videos on YouTube? They're like the little 5-second long videos where it's like, candy cane making factories, making candy canes and glass blowing, and what it does, it just turns your brain off and you just become a monkey, right? And it's hard to kind of run at times with that no mind. And so, I'm really enjoying just looking at his face and looking at his head and thinking, there's a pretty rad place that Zach is going right now in his brain in order to mentally be capable of pulling forward with another 6 or 7 hours. I'm kind of jealous of him right now.
Well, you should be, but there's the other side of it. We've kind of gone back and forth on this, and both of you talked about the distractions that you had and that little bubble, that window that someone's taken away. And Dean, you've talked about all the people outside that are waving, and then Barack Obama's limousine comes up and everything. You've got so many distractions. When you're out on the roads, you get by those distractions, and some of those things are annoyances, and some are also a relief. But on the treadmill, it's just locked in. That space that he has, and he's obviously looking at monitors. He said, I'm listening to documentaries, trying to let your mind sort of flow. And, I can relate to that. When I got off my bike and run, people say, what's the best part of the Ironman? And I'd say, well, the little pieces on the run where you kind of get in your own mindset. But I'm not on a treadmill. I'm seeing some people that I don't really want to see, but and then I'm moving ahead. Dean, when you had all those distractions, ideally, is this the environment that you would like, or would you like some of those distractions?
I think I'd like somewhere in between. I think that what Dave and I did, especially Dave with your 24-hour, I think was too distracting. And I think that, especially when people start asking you questions, it's a little bit overwhelming. And you're not always at your best when you're running for 24 hours. And there's a lot of moments where you just don't want to see anyone. You just want to be suffer in silence, and you just don't get those moments. So, had I wanted to do it again, I have no desire to do it again, but I think I would set things up differently. I would still do it for charity, but I wouldn't have a lot of people involved. The other thing with Zach, which I'm noticing, he's drinking a lot. I don't know if they're closely monitoring his fluid intake, but has he taken a bio break yet? Do we know if he's gotten, I mean, at some point, Dave, I don't know about you during the 12-hour, but I imagine certainly during the 24-hour, you had to go use the bathroom.
Oh yeah, no question. You know, you try to hold on to it as much as you can, because you don't want to go to the bathroom too many times. I mean, it really does break up your pace, your rhythm. But yeah, you try to hold on to it as much as you can. And one of the speakers as well too really alluded to the fact that Zach is a high-fat guy, and high-fat guys typically end up peeing a little bit more. So I think we're going to see him taking a little bit more, bathroom breaks. But to get back to that question, Dean, that you were answering, and I think I see there's a lot of similarities between how you respond to certain things, and I do as well too, is, the distractions, it all depends on how you take a distraction and you internalize it. Like I was running at Lazarus Lake's Big Dog's Backyard Ultra last year, and ended up getting third with 53 hours. It all depends on how you take those distractions and how you internalize those. So what ends up happening there is you have to run 6.7 kilometers every hour on the hour until there's one person left standing. And Maggie ended up winning, the World Championships with 60 hours. And so what ends up happening is every hour there's a 3-minute warning, a 2-minute warning, a 1-minute warning by blowing a whistle, and then you have to answer the bell every hour on the hour. And so what I did for about 2 to 3 months before Big Dog's Backyard was I would walk around my house with a whistle, right? And I would blow a whistle and I would eat dark chocolate. I would blow a whistle and I would kiss my children. I would blow a whistle and I would hug my wife. My wife said, there's no whistles allowed in the bedroom, right? And so what you ended up doing was you end up creating a positive experience when it came to hearing that whistle, because Pavlov's dog theory, right? If you blow a whistle and you kick a dog, you blow a whistle, you kick a dog, the dog's going to cower. You blow a whistle and you feed the dog. After a while, the dog's going to salivate. What is Zach doing right now that's making him salivate? And so any distraction, anything that comes into his mind, as long as he can turn that into a positive where he salivates. And I'm looking at him right now, and again, I'm a repeating record here, but I'm so jealous of him because he's learning a lot right now. He's growing as an athlete today.
Yeah, the Pavlov's dog, that's a great one. Yes, Dean, go ahead.
What was the furthest you said he'd never run for 12 hours before on a treadmill. What was the furthest he's ever run on a treadmill?
30 miles.
Time 30?
Yeah, so he's well beyond that now, but again, not even at the halfway point. So this is new territory for him physiologically, nutritionally, and also the mind games that both of you have talked about. How do you manage that discipline and go into your own little stratosphere? Getting through this next 5+ hours.
Right, and I'm gonna just interject here for a second, because I think Jacob Puzey is on now. And I think that there's nobody better in the world to talk about distractions and treadmill running. Jacob's got a couple of treadmill world records himself. Jacob Puzey, are you there?
Yeah, hey Dave.
Hey,
and
all
Dave
right.
and Dean. Thank you.
Jacob. Yeah, no, it's an honor to have you. And we've kind of hit on a lot of different topics. I don't know if you've been listening in before you come on, but just so the viewer knows your background, and I had a question for Dean and Dave as well on this. Your 50-mile treadmill record that you did in 2016, is that correct? Was 4 hours and 57 minutes. And if people do the math on this is a 5:56 mile for 50 of them in a row on a treadmill. I mean, it's phenomenal, because most people can't even, run 100 meters at that pace, let alone 50 miles back to back. So on that day in 2016, when you did it, did you know that you're capable of holding that pace? Was that the pace you wanted to lock into, or just felt like, hey, I might as well play a game of chess or just run 50 miles at a 5:56 mile pace? And I said, that's a 3:43 roughly per K pace as well. And it's rocketing. How'd you do
it? Like Zach and like Dave and like Dean and others who have run records on the treadmill, I did it with a lot of support. I basically, part of reason for doing it was, what could I do if I eliminated all the variables that you typically deal with in a race? So it's like, what can I do if all my fuel is right there? What can I do if the porta potty is right there? What can I do if all I have to do is just lock in and run and not think about anything else? And so that's a big part of how I was able to do that. I think, like Zach is doing, and like Dave alluded to, I was aware that there was a record out there, and so really my goal was just whatever that pace is, just try and run about that pace, and then maybe pick it up at the end. And I started quite conservatively, like Zach did earlier this morning, and was fueling quite a bit. He took a number of restroom breaks earlier on, and he was switching up the treadmill and things like that, just kind of feeling, getting warmed up and getting going. And that's kind of how it went for me. I think at the time the record was right around 7-minute pace. And so my goal was, hey, just try and run 6:59 and see how long you can hold that. And it only took about 10 miles for me to feel like that was not efficient. In fact, it was, there have been a number of people speak on this, just kind of finding that zone, and whether it's related to heart rate or pace or anything, there were certain paces that felt right and certain ones that didn't. And so I just kind of kept adjusting the pace on the treadmill based on how I felt. And I'm kind of a lanky guy, so my knees kept hitting the front of the treadmill when I was running at the goal pace. And so I was just like, okay, I need to run a little bit faster so that I quit hitting my knees. And I'd done some training on the treadmill, but like Zach, it wasn't like I'd replicated 50 miles on the treadmill before going and doing it. I think leading up to it, it was maybe 18 miles on the treadmill on that specific model in months leading up to it. So.
Wow. I mean, what a remarkable day. I mean, I think all of you can relate to, hey, I'm going to go out on a run, and maybe your friend or whomever is a lot slower than you. So you're running their pace, and the amount of stick time that you have on the ground, your rebound or recoil is not there. And so it throws off your biomechanics. Just what you're talking about, Jacob. You feel like, this is too darn slow. I got to ratchet it up so I'm more fluid. And I think we can all relate to that. The one thing interesting looking at Zach right now is that, he's getting closer to that 50-mile mark, and he's holding a little under 7-minute pace, if my math is correct on this. So he's on an extraordinary time, as David and Dean had pointed out. When you did your 50-miler, why not just go another 50, Jacob? I mean, just say, hey, I feel pretty good. I've run this 50 and 4:57. Why don't I just click off 50 more? Did you feel pretty good when you finished?
I did, but I emptied the tank. I think I got to about 4 hours, and I knew that, well, there were a couple options. It was kind of like go for 50K, go for 50 miles, potentially go 100K. And it was just kind of go with what feels right. And I knew that I was feeling good through about 40 miles, or through about 4 hours. But then I got to that point, like some of us have talked about, where it's kind of like, okay, I just want to get off the treadmill. Like, let's just, so rather than like trying to see how long I could go, I just started, like, there were some times when I was actually going under 5-minute pace, I believe. I'm not positive, but I was just trying to like get my legs turning over and just like get this thing over. I was like beating on the treadmill, and it actually woke my legs up, but it was also, I knew I had about an hour left in me. I didn't on that day, I didn't feel like, given what I had put in prior to that, I just felt like, I don't have twice this amount of time today, both because of how I had been training and also just how I was feeling that day. And so I didn't want to get greedy either. It was just kind of like, hey, this is a good day. I'm gonna be grateful for what it is and not try and make it any more than it already is. So
yeah, well, it was an amazing day. We've talked a lot of we talked a lot about urinating. That's come up quite a bit, and how many bathroom breaks you're going to take. A little bit about fueling too, and obviously the science has changed. And Dean and I were talking about this earlier. Back when I raced, now I'm a lot older than you guys, times 12. I told people, they should eat like 20 figs on the bike. And so a lot of people said, Dave's got to eat figs. And of course, when they got to the run, most people's stomach were distended about 3 times the size, and they were hitting the porta potty every mile. That was not good advice. I was able to get through it. I saw a shot of you, Jacob. You were on the 50 mile, and it looked like you had a garbage bin in front of you. You had Lay's potato chips, and you had all sorts of beverage bottles and all sorts of things. And I guess my question is that, you find what works. And, I know the science quite well. We know it a lot better now than certainly my day when I raced. But, and Dave, you kind of alluded to the low carb, high fat diet that Zach is on, and his economy, and talking to Dan, his fat oxidation rates are really, really high. All of you have found something that works. And one of the things with the fat oxidation and low carb, high fat, and obviously Zach is taking SFuels Race Plus that has a fair amount of sodium, and the sodium helps retain the cell full of water, so you're not having to pee as much. Was that in your mindset, Dean? I'll start with you.
I paid attention to salt intake, but I mean, I was using caps, so I was not using it from my fuel. I personally, I don't sweat a whole lot. Like, I know my sweat rate, so I don't need to take in a lot of electrolytes. Yeah. But I was more concerned about pure volume. Like, the more you drink of volume, the more you're gonna have to step off this treadmill, especially when it came to the 48-hour run. I just knew the more that's coming in, the more it's gonna have to go out eventually.
And just on weight loss, when you did your 24 hours, your starting weight, your finishing weight, what was that?
The first time I lost about 4 pounds, and the next time I lost about a pound, not as much.
Wow. I mean, that's very minimal for an indoor conditions. Dave, how about you on your world record 100 miler?
Yeah. I mean, when you're moving a little bit quicker, not nearly as quick as Jake over there, but like, you're definitely trying to take in more of the simple sugars, trying to fuel that way. I'm not a 100-mile runner though. I'm a multi-day guy. I just came off of a 400-mile week. And so, I eat a lot of pie, man. I eat a lot of nuts and seeds, and, I try to ignore the science the best I can, because the science tells me that what I'm doing is wrong. And I just try to ignore it, man. I try not to read it, because I'm feeling pretty good. I'm like, next year I'm running across the country over 100 kilometers a day for 72 days in a row. And so, it's just, for me, I'll take up to 500 calories an hour, but I'm also not moving nearly as quick. I know all last week my heart rate was in zone 1 every single step of the way, and I was taking in 400 to 600 calories an hour, but I still ended up losing 7 pounds on the week. Or on the 2 weeks, I guess. So, when it comes to nutrition, don't ask me, because I'm not going
to next time. I mean,
no.
People listen to you, and you're taking in 400, 600 calories. I mean, you're off the charts. And, again, and not to diffuse anything that you've done, because what works for you. But I think some of the science that we know that hopefully we can replicate with a larger percentage of people. If I said, hey, just follow Dave Proctor's diet and take in 500 calories, we'd have everyone implode on every exercise session that they had.
And I think that there's, and I think there's a number of things. I think that, I'm a better eater than I am a runner. And I remember I was talking to Pete Kostelnick, the guy who's got the Trans-American speed record. He ran from San Francisco, New York City in 42 days or something. And, he said, you got to be a better eater than you are a runner. It's more of an eating contest than it is a running contest. And so, I'm a better eater than I am a runner for sure. And I can digest a truck. It's pretty.
We're back with that QR code. Take a snapshot of that, get those donations rolling in. We are striving for that $10,000 mark today to get that donor match. Hopefully we can get to that before the end of the day. We've got some prize awards again. Congrats to the runners that have won. We've got the SFuels product pack. And then a reminder to get into the Nordic Track. They are going to be giving away a top of the line, the X3 2i series. the incline trainer. So they'll be giving that away around mile 90. So you want to get in and get registered for that so that way you get a shot at that. We have a couple athletes on queue here for, I believe we finally got Tom back. So the one we were supposed to highlight before, he is back in. He went back to his treadmill.
Where is Tom located?
There's Tom. Hi, Tom.
Yeah. And
We caught you just as you stepped away last time. So.
what pace are you holding, Tom? What pace is he doing? Do you know, Christina?
I'm not sure what pace he's holding right now, but
I don't think it's Zach's pace.
he's trucking along though.
Yeah, no, he looks good. He looks like he's wearing boxing shorts.
All right, and then our next athlete is Dan. He is a 10-time Ironman finisher?
Yep.
Yep, so he is
Congrats, Dan.
Yep, good time.
going to be doing a 10K today with Zach.
Pretty close.
Awesome. Well, good luck with the rest of your run, and thanks for joining in and being part of this, helping Zach get through his miles.
Got it. Thank you.
We'll see you guys in the next half hour.
Yeah, so Dave, to answer your question there about nutrition, you know, I'm gonna sign off here. I gotta get running. I gotta get back to parenting my 3 kids. But you know, Jacob Puzey with Peak Performance Coaching, he's probably the best. He's the most underrated coach in the world, and phenomenal when it comes to knowledge about nutrition and things. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pass that question off to him because he's a stud. So and signing out, guys.
Dave.
Yeah.
Hang out just for 1 minute, will you?
You bet.
1 minute, okay.
Thank you, Dave. That's very kind. I admire you in so many ways. You've exceeded my monthly volume in the last several weeks, or like just last week. You exceeded my I don't think I've had a month that big in a decade. So.
Thank you, Jake. And as a coach, would you advise against that? I maybe don't even answer that because I'm feeling I know your answer.
No, I was raised in a very blue collar wrestling town, and so I was raised around wrestlers who don't necessarily have the best diets either. But I was raised with the philosophy of eat for fuel, not for taste, and so. I'm, especially when it comes to performance nutrition, I'm all about keeping it simple and just make sure you're getting the right amount of starches, sugars, and salts that you need. And everyone's different, and the event distance and weather and everything is gonna change. And then kind of like has been alluded to throughout the day, my brother actually talked a little bit about, you know, our bodies are very adaptive, and so our bodies can take whatever we put into them and turn them into glucose, which is what we need. So if shortening and white flour and whatever the filling is what fuels you and what feels most efficient to you, I'm all for it. If that's a bison burger, all for it. If it's an avocado, whatever, you know, whatever your body seems to do well with, that's what I recommend. I think nutrition is a lot like footwear. You just got to try on a bunch of different shoes and figure out what works, and also be willing to shift and switch it up a little bit, just like we do with our footwear. So, yeah.
You bet. And speaking of switching it up, it looks like Zach is switching up the treadmills right now. He seems to be going back and forth between the treadmills. I think it's probably because he doesn't want to blow up a treadmill. The speed that he's going is probably driving those things pretty heavy.
Yeah, there were some questions about that earlier today, and I tried to chime in on the live chat, but my understanding is that those models have it at the maximum, like a 3-hour window where they can go. And if anyone's ever been on a treadmill when it just stops, whether it's that the motor blows or whether that's just the governor, you don't want to do that. And so I assume he has other strategies behind it, but even with the 50 miler, we had to have at least 2 next to each other. And I switched back and forth a couple times in part because of a fueling snafu where I poured a bag of chips all over me and it shot out like confetti on people. And then also a bottle of Coke exploded in my face and all over the treadmill. So it got really sticky and really slick. And so I think Jamil mentioned that it's probably that it was getting sweaty and the monitor was maybe sweaty. So there are a lot of different reasons to switch it up, even though it might seem inefficient to be moving that around. But just wanted to address some of those earlier questions when he was making those changes. So.
Great. Dave, I know you got a dash, so thanks for coming on. And Dean's got something to say, I think, here. Dean, go ahead.
I just had to share my hat. Can you see it?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, you got a cowboy hat there.
I see your hat in the background. I'm like, I got one of the. I did the Calgary, the inaugural Ultra.
Right. I remember. Yeah, I met you there. That was fantastic. Yeah. No, there's nothing that screams Calgary, Canada more than the Stetson cowboy hat. So yeah, you look good in it, Dean.
I got to share. Yeah.
Right on, brother. Yeah. Take care, guys.
Hey, Dave, thank you for joining us, and we'll keep track of Zach through your eyes and your mental vision. All right. Thanks for your time. I'm just going to just comment just a couple things on the nutrition intake a little bit. And Jacob and Dave and Dean, in your career and in mine as well, we kind of gravitated to, I think this is going to work for me. And I tried a lot of different concoctions, and it was very high carbohydrate, and that worked for me. And a lot of people have backfired on that over the years. And so my advice, even over the last 35 years, is don't eat as much and you'll probably be better off. And then we looked at Dave, he's eating 500 calories an hour, and he can virtually eat anything. And Jacob, you're just saying, you could try different things. Part of the premise of what Zach is on, being a low carb, high fat guy, is that we were all high carbohydrate. I was too, and I've gravitated to the SFuels program, and prior to that, just thinking that, gee, I want to maybe reduce some of the inflammatory response, particularly as we're aging. And again, I'm a lot older than you guys. So that was the first thing. And then also just kind of looking at the science, like, why would this be better? I think the first thing is that we can minimize the caloric intake, and we can minimize the type of sugar index and sugar alcohols that we have. And so a lot of people that have gone to low carb, high fat, or even all the way down to a ketogenic diet, which is discussed on the SFuels site, say, gee, I don't have the GI disruptions that I've had in the latter stages of the race. And certainly you've seen this in your event as well. Like, people are having to stop too often. They, they're vomiting, they got diarrhea, and they've got GI distress, so their pace slows down. And I would see this all the time. I'm always adding up calories with triathletes, like, how much did you take in, and when did you take it in, and the timing, and so on. And my first response is, well, cut it back, because if you can oxidize fats like Zach is, and Dan was alluding to this, that he's burning primarily free fatty acids at about 80% of his total calories that he's burning, and therefore he doesn't need as much of the race plus, which has a cyclic dextrin. So the cyclic dextrin is a slow absorbing, it doesn't cause an insulin spike. And one of the things that Zach has found that works for him is to kind of gravitate to the SFuels line that doesn't have the sugar alcohols and the insulin spikes, and trying to push that glucose somewhere, where I think a lot of the athletes that I always come into contact with, they think, well, I've got to take the fluid replacement drink at the volume that the manufacturer said, and I've got to take these 2 gels. And all of a sudden I'm doing this math, Dean, that we talked about, and I can add up jock math and calories pretty fast. And they're just taking in way, way, way too much. And all of a sudden they've got this bolus of food, and the water's being drawn to their GI tract, and they're thinking, oh man, I don't feel good. And the pace slows down. So, we're trying to get athletes to think about this just a little bit more. We got an update right now. So Christina, I think, is going to come on. 45 miles, 5 hours and 22 minutes. He's nearing the halfway point. I'm going to ask both you guys, as we're looking at these graphs, Jacob, first off, have you run with Zach? Have you seen his biomechanics sort of side by side, or are you just viewing him for the first time, or maybe on YouTube or whatever?
Yeah, we met and ran together several years ago at an ultra running, like a team gathering summit kind of thing, an athlete summit. I think it was Zach was relatively new to the team then, and I had followed his career. He and I actually have quite a bit in common. We were both secondary school teachers, and we were just kind of weekend warriors and kind of came into ultra running. We both ran in high school and college, but neither of us was like stellar at the 5K, 10K. But fortunately, the beauty of the sport, and especially ultra running, is that you can continue. And so one thing that both his gait and just his strengths, I've noticed that he really has that ability to run just kind of right below that threshold and maintain that for an ungodly amount of time. He can just grind, he may not have a 5th or 6th gear, but Honda Civics are pretty efficient, even if they're only a 4-speed, and that's how I view Zach. He can cruise for a long time. And gait wise, yeah, I've followed, we've run side by side, and his mechanics look different than mine, but my mechanics, no one would ever point my mechanics out and say that's like perfect form right there. What he has found is he's found how to make his body efficient. And one thing I really admire about him is that he's from the Midwest. He's just kind of got that no nonsense, no excuses kind of mentality. It's like, this is a body I've been given. I'm just gonna keep putting one foot in front of the other and not gonna ask any questions. really, I mean, he's intelligent about his training and his strategy and things like that, but he's also just kind of bullheaded in a very humble way, but just kind of like, yeah, that's what I want to do, and I'm going to go do it. And
yeah, well, you need to be bullheaded. That's for darn sure. I mean, he's got 55 miles to go, 5 miles away from that halfway point, which is pretty remarkable. And Dean, we're kind of looking at this graph that we've been watching before you came on, Jacob. He's gone from about 148, 149 on his heart rate, but his pace has dropped also. So he was at 7-minute pace at the lower heart rate. The last one we saw was 152, and he was 6:52 pace. So he's telling himself right now, I'm going to hold this pace a little bit faster, not being even at the halfway point. Dean, what do you think of that strategy? I mean, and any comments also on his biomechanics?
Well, first of all, I wish we could get a psychological profile, because I think it's going one of two ways here. I mean, he's, you can fall apart. I mean, he's got a long way to go, and I just wonder what's going on in his head. Is he, I'm struggling, this is going to be really tough, or is he, hey, this has been comfortable, I'm going to smash a negative split. So I think it's still really early on. It's kind of interesting to watch what'll happen from here on out. The one thing that I'd like to dive into, Dave, with you, especially now I've got a chance to talk to you, is the type of fat. We've been talking a lot about fat utilization. But we know there's a lot of different types of fat. Does that matter? Be it monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, saturated. Can you talk a little bit about the type of fat?
Yeah, we ideally want to gravitate to, a simple statement is gravitate to the healthier fats. So we can start weeding out the bad stuff. So a lot of the hydrogenated fats that are heated fats, it changes the chemical composition of those fats, and it's added to a lot of packaged items that we have to increase shelf life. So you can take a great oil like palm oil or coconut oil and heat it, and then it becomes pretty toxic. So it causes internal inflammation. And we're familiar with inflammation when you get a cut, but a lot of times our systemic inflammation is affected by really bad fats, and that's kind of the ones that percolate to the top. And the second ones are all the I always tell people to open up their pantries and look at the clear oils that they have in their pantries. So people think, oh, canola oil is pretty good, and safflower oil is good, and cottonseed oil. Those are all rotten. Same reason. So we gravitate to healthier oils, and we want to try to shift also a higher index of our omega-3 oils as well. So, I always have people, well, make a list of those healthy oils, and I know both you can rattle them off, but if we look at coconut oil and olive oil and walnut oil and avocado oil, those are all healthy oils, and the oils that are contained within seeds and nuts that aren't cooked and coated with sugar and everything else. We can take a macadamia nut that's really high in monounsaturated fat. Well, we know that's good for your heart health as well, and almonds and walnuts, and you mentioned hazelnuts and some of these nut butters, Dean, that you have. we need to gravitate to those healthier sides. I always tell people, eat a bucket of avocados and olives, and you're probably going to increase your good physiology. And don't gravitate to Twinkies that are loaded with a bunch of crap. And that's a quick cursory view of healthier fat. But one of the things that Zach does in his diet to go to low carb, high fat is to load up on those healthy fats, and his fat percentage in his diet in comparison to the other macronutrients, protein and carbohydrate, is really, really high. Somewhere between that 65 to 75% of his total calories are in healthy fat. So Jacob, that sounds a lot different than you. You're a lean guy, you're darn fast, you look good, you got 6 kids, I heard. So that's amazing in itself. And Jacob, do you watch what you take in on a daily basis? And what's your age? I should know that. I got your bio here, but I don't know how old you are. I know
I'm 37.
You like potato chips, but
yeah, I'm 37, and I should note that, and I think Zach would do the same. What I consume when I'm racing is not what I would consume on a daily basis. So I don't really drink any sort of sugary drink throughout the day on a day-to-day basis, and I don't put salt in my liquids, or so my daily diet is different than my performance diet, I guess. Even though I'm training on a daily basis, I don't go to the well very often, and I don't run more than 2 or 3 hours at a time very often, and so I don't need those more refined fuel sources when on a day-to-day basis. So to be honest, I eat kind of based on when I'm going to be running throughout the day, and especially right now, it's just a goal to get something in every day, especially with all the kids at home, and homeschool and no childcare, and trying to share time and things with my wife. And so sometimes my run will consist of just running the kids from one place to the other in a stroller, usually 2 of them at once, or pulling them behind me in a bike and things like that. But I tend to prefer to eat differently before I run versus after I run. I tend to feel better if I eat kind of more plant-based prior to running, and then after I run, I'm like a carnivore. So I just I switch from one to the other. But I don't like having anything super heavy in my system. And so I usually eat something a little bit more simple. An avocado, for some reason, doesn't weigh as much in my stomach as like an egg would. An egg would upset my stomach if I were to eat it before I would go run, but I don't have a problem coming home and making an omelet or something like that. So anyway, there's no, I do believe there's science in it. I try and eat nutrient dense foods, and I do try and roughly eat what feels like the right amount of fats and proteins and carbs for me, and ideally as little processing as possible. But yeah, I also just, I eat by convenience as well. Kind of like Dave said, I do eat a lot of nuts because those are just easy to, throw, grab a handful and get through another couple hours, and then, oh, I should probably eat a lunch now. And so, yeah, it varies from day to day. So.
One of the things that will help and the viewers maybe to have a better grasp of this, if they just go to the SFuels website, there's a quick start guide on, not only the science, which I think is very helpful to read, and people can discern whether or not it's of value to them, but also on the quick start guide, there's a plethora of healthy foods that you can take in. And I think a lot of people think, well, if I go to low carb, high fat, it's too restrictive for me. And I'll say, no, it's not, because there's a magnificent amount of food choices that you can have. And I think to poo-poo at first is people should really have a comprehensive blood test, because a lot of times our genetic profile is really set by our ancestry and our parents, and it's also your environment that you're in. So you should have a very comprehensive blood test to look at the inflammatory markers, and that will give you a good indication. Hey, if you're 37, or if you're Dean, you're 57 now, Dean, is that correct? Somewhere around there. I know you still got the hottest body in the world and all that.
Chronological age and biological age are 2 different things, as you know, Dave.
Well, we're all trying to hang on to whatever that youthful seed is that we have, and Dean, you brought it up just on eating over time, and obviously we can go way back. I'm 66, so I got a lot of years on you guys, and I've changed my diet dramatically, and I recently, or a year ago, I went back to Australia and I gave a clinic 25 or 28 years ago, and I had a lot of older people like myself, and a couple of them came up to me and they said, Dave, you told us back then to eat all those carbohydrates. And I said, well, I'm sorry about that. I'm glad you're still alive. Dean, have you changed your diet? I mean, you alluded to the nut butters and you tried it way back in 06 and 07. The science has been around for really ketogenic diet at the turn of the century, or back in the early 1900s, but the whole low carb, high fat, which increases fat oxidation and reduces some inflammation, has been around for quite a while, but it's now becoming more mainstream. When did you change, and what do you do now?
You know, I was raised, I'm 100% Greek. So I was raised in a very traditional Greek family, and our diet was very good when I was a kid. And then I went to, you know, junk food basically. And now, you know, my diet pretty much, you know, if you can't pick it from a tree or dig it from the earth or catch it with your hands, you know, like wild game, or catch it with a hook, I don't eat it. So I really don't eat any processed foods. I'm pretty much raw. Like I don't cook any of my food. Dave, you probably remember Jack LaLanne. He was like a big mentor.
Yeah, of course.
He told me one time, he said, if man makes it, don't eat it. And if it tastes good, spit it out. I love this guy.
Well, he had a very hard line. Well, I mean, it's good advice. I think your advice is great. And Jacob, on yours, it's not, I mean, you're trying to hold your family together during COVID. You got 6 kids. You've got a business that Dave was talking about, Peak Performance. Tell us about, you got your shirt on. What do you do as far as your coaching business? And not that we need to stick on nutrition, but do you advise your athletes on nutrition? But first, just tell us about your business.
Yeah, thank you. So I've been coaching about half my life now. When I started volunteer coaching at the end of high school, just younger kids, but then I coached through college, and went back to my alma mater and coached at my high school there for a decade while I was teaching, while Zach was teaching as well. So we were two secondary social studies teachers trying to run ultras. And I switched over to coaching online kind of as the kids came, and I couldn't be gone every weekend at other people's kids events. I needed to be home and I wanted to run a few of my own events every once in a while. So I made that switch to online in 2014 with Greg McMillan. And then a couple of years later, I kind of branched out on my own, and he was very generous and said, you know, I want you to be the Greg McMillan of your world kind of thing. I was like, all right, cool. Thank you. So he was a really good mentor. And now I coach people from all over the world virtually. So in some respects, I was kind of set up for the working from home that's going on right now. There's just been a lot of changes in everyone's lives. And so helping other people adjust to that and things. So I write plans for anywhere from the mile or the 5K up to 100 milers or 200 milers or stage races. I love running, and I try not to, paint myself into a corner and say I'm an ultra runner or I'm a mountain runner. It's just like, no, I'm a runner, and I want to work with runners or even aspiring runners. And so I really love what I do. I generally, when it comes to nutrition, I have some general background in nutrition, both things that I've read, but also some coursework that I've done. But one of our coaches, who's also a world-class runner and swimmer, has a PhD in nutrition and metabolism. And so when people want to get into the really big nuts and bolts and calculate things, I say, I can refer you to some books, but here's someone that actually has lived it and knows how to help you find that right combination. But I truly believe that all of us are different, just like training. And, like Dave ran more last week than I have honestly in like many months, and probably since my college days. I haven't run 100-mile a week since college, so it's been a long time. And so I do believe in finding what works for people. But I'm also not opposed to, I hate the dogmatism that comes with diets. So if someone is fat based or has ketogenic or whatever, I really like that. And one of the things that I really admire about Zach is just how non-polarizing he is when he talks about his diet, because it can be very polarizing. He explains the science and he says, this is what works for me and this is why I do it. But he doesn't speak condescendingly toward people who choose to do something else. And that was one thing that just like, when Zach and I first met, that just really struck a chord with me. Was like, this is an honest, down-to-earth, good guy, humble guy. I don't know that he has any ego other than just he's super confident. He knows that obviously he's going after a world record, but if you walked by him on the street, you would never think like, hey, that guy's full of himself or anything like that. And not about his diet, not about his training philosophy, not about anything. It's just like, hey, this works for me. I'd like to help other people find out what works. And so, yeah, that's what I do coaching wise. I think he and I do a lot of things similarly in terms of coaching and training philosophy. I actually spoke with someone today about going fat adapted, because, he said, I'm plant-based and I don't know why I'm retaining all this fat and I don't know how to lose weight and I'm running a lot. Why am I doing it? It's like, just because it's plant-based doesn't mean it's healthy. Like Rich Roll says that, like you can't. So it's trying to find people, or trying to help people find what works, but everyone kind of comes to me at a different place. And so it's trying to figure out what are some tweaks that we can make now and then eventually move it long-term towards getting better.
Good.
We are headed into that 1 o'clock time frame here soon, where we will have the guest speaker in talking about Fight for the Forgotten. So they'll give you a little bit more information on that foundation. That QR is up. Go ahead and take a snapshot of that to donate right to their website and get that $10,000 matching credit done. We've got a prize pack for a couple of the athletes here. So congrats to them. We'll get those out to you via social media. And then we've got Dan is actually doing his run. So we're going to check in on him. We won't talk to him and interrupt him, but we'll just check out and see how he's doing.
Christine, I have a question too. Oh, there's Dan. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Do you have that at 10% gradient?
Me?
He can't hear us, but he looks pretty.
He knows he's not supposed to have to talk to us again until later. So this was a surprise attack.
That's fine. I know that we had talked about possibly dialing into Zach. Can we put him on audio at all, Christina?
Yeah, let's see if we can get him up.
I don't know if he wants to talk. And
just hold off on that. Just hold off on that. We'll come back to you. Thanks.
Hold off on that. Okay, very good.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, looks like Dan is doing awesome for his marathon, and we'll have a chat with him after he's finished a little bit later, so we can see how he's feeling. And then
do you know what kind of doctor he is?
Excuse me?
Do you know what kind of doctor Dan is?
I believe he is a physiologist. Is that correct, Dave?
Yeah, he's an exercise physiologist. He teaches in New Zealand. So, and he has a coursework program for low carb, high fat that he does, and a coaching program as well that kind of parallels maybe all of us. I mean, I have a coaching platform, and here we are. Jacob, you've got yours, and so Dan's done quite well. We'll see how he rolls along. I did notice the time on Zach right now is 5 hours and 40 something minutes. Christina, is that correct?
Yes, looks like we've got 5 hour. Oh, look, they even put it up for us.
Well, that's brilliant.
You will receive. It was magic.
What mile split are we at the moment?
Oh, it's We made it.
I'm liking the feel of this treadmill better, so that I can stay on this one for most of the rest of the day. Let's see if we can negative split this thing. What do you say, negative split?
Yeah, let's do
Yes,
it.
that negative split. All right, I will see you guys in a half hour.
Thank you, Christina.
Bye.
Okay. Dean, what are you doing when you're, no, I want to ask, Dean, I'm not cutting you out. I want to ask Jacob just one more comment or question. I took a quote, I'm not really sure where I saw this, but I think when the advent of when you were a youngster and you said, you know, I enjoy running, you took the physical education presidential council on running and said, well, that was kind of fun. I want to do more of this. But this is your quote, and I'm going to abbreviate a little bit. And you said, it changed me socially, emotionally, and the outlook on life and behavior changed for me. And I kind of paraphrased the end of that. In what way? Obviously, you followed that for now 2.5 decades or more.
Yeah, when I started running competitively, I was a prepubescent kid, young for my grade, and trying to be a basketball player in a small town that follows ball sports. And I was scrappy, but I wasn't having a lot of success there. School wasn't ever a challenge for me, but not spouting off and not getting in trouble for being a little kid with little man syndrome and trying to be the class clown was a problem for me. My coach, my high school coach, even when I was in middle school, I got in trouble and I actually was supposed to be suspended and not be able to go to a meet. And he met me at the race, and I was a nobody. He had no interest in showing any interest in me, especially as a middle schooler. I wasn't like I had any promise. And he came up to me and he said, you know, I heard that you got in a bit of a scuffle at school. It was because of my last name. Someone was making fun of my last name and got in my face, and that's what middle schoolers do. So I got in a fight and got suspended from school. And he said, you know, when you're running for me, I need you to make sure that you conduct yourself in a way that that represents you and your family and your team well. And if I count on you to be one of our runners, you can't be getting in trouble that's going to jeopardize, you know, your teammates' success. I was 12 or 13 years old when he put his hand on my shoulders, and I doubt he remembers it, but I do.
He may remember it, Jacob, and it was obviously emotionally, you know, it's a big seed that was planted.
Yeah, it changed my life. I went from being in school suspension. I liked in school suspension. It was easier. It was just like, cool, I don't have to be in the classroom. I could just get all my work done. But that was like my MO, just like get out of class, get my work done, and read for pleasure and stuff like that. And I went from being the kid that went to the principal's office on at least a weekly basis for something to, you know, getting recognized on a very regular basis, like academically, for leadership, for like I was the kid by the time I graduated from high school. I was the kid whose my male friends' moms would come to me and say, hey, will you take care of my son this weekend? And my friends that were females, parents, fathers even, would come up and say, hey, so-and-so's having a hard time, will you watch out for her? And so I went from being that punk that was trying to get attention to being like kind of the, not just the designated driver or whatever, but sort of the adult at the gatherings in our small town where people were doing stupid stuff because they were bored. And when I think of that mentorship that I had, and even some of my teammates that were older that again weren't necessarily stellar runners, but they taught me some of that work ethic. I had a kid that picked me up, or a guy that picked me up that was a couple of years older than me, who was a wrestler. And so he was wrestling during the winter and I was playing basketball. And so he picked me up at 5 a.m. in my house and we'd go running before school. And that winter I went from being like the last guy on the JV team to I made the varsity track team. Like, and I won some races, and it was because I didn't stop training throughout the whole year. And, you know, I got confidence, and these people who I admired, who seemed like they had their stuff together, treated me like I wasn't just some waste of time. And all of a sudden I started seeing myself that way. And I feel like running has the ability to do that for everyone. It's transformational, physically, emotionally, socially, spiritually. Like it's a beautiful thing. So.
Very, very, very eloquent, Jacob. And thank you for unveiling that, because obviously it hits an emotional chord. And, I think a lot of people that show that to the public, which you just did, realize the value that running has given you and everything else. And
running has the ability to do that for everyone. It's transformational, physical. Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Dean. I am a huge fan. I can't believe that I'm getting to be on this with you and with Zach. And I mean, I admire you greatly, and if didn't follow your career, but I've read about your career, and I appreciate what you have done and what you're doing now. And thank you for who you are and what you're doing. So.
Well, Jacob, thank you for coming on board here. I know we're going to be handing over the screen to the other hosts that are coming up, but I really enjoyed your insight and just your candor, which was brilliant. So thanks for having us. And I'm going to shift this over to Dean since he's part of the show, and then I know we're going to hand this off to 3 other folks. So Jacob, thank you again for coming on board.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Hey, Jacob, I had a funny junior high school experience. So I won the state championship when I was in 7th grade. And here's what my coach said. So my coach asked me afterward, he was like a man of few words. He said, how'd it go? And I said, oh, it went pretty well. It felt good. And he looked at me and said, if it felt good, you didn't go hard enough. It's supposed to hurt like hell. And then he just walked. And that was the last time I ever saw the guy. If it felt good, you didn't go hard enough. It's supposed to hurt like hell. And he walked away. And that was the influence he left on me.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you found it later in life, because you've certainly inspired millions of people. So thank you for not letting that guy hold you down or keep you down, and for rekindling that fire in so many of us. So.
Jacob, just to finalize here, and obviously you're in the same blood as Dean and Zach. And Zach's taking a little breather right now. Again, I don't know if he's changing the treadmill, but if there's one quick little message that you could share with Zach here before we all move aside. But what would you tell Zach right now? He's nearing that 6-hour mark.
Well, I mean, Zach knows his body better than anyone. And so I would just say, trust your training, trust your experience, trust your gut. But I loved when he said, should we go for a negative split? Like he and I are, honestly, I feel like he's not just a kindred spirit. I feel like we're from the same cloth. We're the same DNA, because it takes me a marathon, or it takes me a long time to feel like I'm even warmed up. And then it's like, all right, cool. Let's start rolling. And so Zach, you know what to do, and just do what you were made to do. And this is one thing that you're able to do very well, better than anyone else in the world. So keep inspiring.
Great. Thank you, Jacob. And Dean, I know we're about done here. I don't know if we got a progress update here. So, right, darn close to that halfway point, 49 miles, 5 hours and 51 minutes. Now, if he keeps this up, he's going to shatter that record. He's been negative splitting it over the last 12 to 13 miles. So, the last 20 kilometers, he has brought down his pace. Dean, just your final comments to Zach and just overall on what we viewed for the last 2 hours.
It's been amazing, and my final comment to Zach is suck it up, Buttercup.
Well, that's really
put the fight in him. Yeah.
No, that was really eloquent too, Dean. Anyway. No, this has been awesome, and it's been fun to watch. And we're going to hand off here in just a second, but I just want to thank you, Dean. Thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure reconnecting. Hopefully, I'm going to see you in the gym again, and it won't be after 50 miles that you've run, nor 3 miles for me, because I kind of hobble right now. But a pleasure having you on and having your insight for this. And you're back,
Dave. And I'm going to geek out a little bit. You've so profoundly influenced my life. I mean, I know that our sports are a little bit different, but I followed your career from when, you know, I first started ultra marathoning, and I knew Bob Babbitt back then, and you're mind blowing. I mean, I'll never forget the picture of you walking off of Kona. I think you came in 4th place the last year you did it, and you had your 2 kids in either arms. It's just kind of a back shot of you. So you're like this dad, this stud, and I just thought, I love this guy. Everything he's about, I just love.
Well, it was actually 5th place. It was actually 5th place, but thank you. That was my last one in '96. No one really knows about that, but you did. Anyway, I'd also like to thank SFuels and their team for choreographing this amazing event, and for Zach, you know, what I have learned just in the 2 hours that we've been here and prior to is his mental willpower is just like a deranged bull, and I think he's going to prevail. So hopefully this last 50 will go well. So again, thank you, Dean, and we're going to hand this off to Jim Jordan. I know that you're going to have Dawn on the show as well. So team, take it away. It's your turn, and keep Zach motivated. Cheers.
Hey, well done, gentlemen. I really enjoyed listening. I've been riveted, waiting for our time, certainly know what was coming up, but I couldn't turn away from the event. You know, watching Zach, I saw him this morning when he launched off, I was with him, and he looks the same. I'm wondering if it's the same tape they're playing. I'm not sure, because he looks like a metronome. And then listening to you guys, very entertaining. Love the discussion. So thank you for teaching us and entertaining us as we're watching the world record go down. So thanks, guys. And Jacob, good to see you again.
You too. Thank you.